manners are better than others. Don't want to go making friends with the rocks. I can help you there. I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks.
But in the book, after Harry won't shake his hand, he describes Draco going slightly pink from embarrassment and saying,
"Oh yeah, well, if you're not polite, you'll go the way of your parents. And the riffraff will rub on you. Friggin'.
And the rest is history. In Draco's second appearance at the Hogwarts Express, we experience another side of him. His temper, his pettiness, his neediness towards people he sees as more powerful and famous than himself. If your position is higher than his and you won't accept him and be the jewel in his crown, he goes into a defensive explosion. There's all this demand for power and control. He wants to destroy Harry the way white blood cells want to destroy bacteria. He has to neutralize this threat right away, or else, well, anything could happen. The unknown is quite scary. It's quite reminiscent of the environment he was raised in, where there's this fixation on status. It doesn't matter if it's the Minister of Magic or Voldemort, Draco's father, Lucius, courts power. Compare and contrast. Harry's friends are his friends out of sheer happenstance. Ron is a boy he meets heading to Hogwarts on the train. Hermione's the girl Harry feels responsible for warning about a troll. Draco's two best friends are the Sons of Death Eaters. They're a part of the sacred 28 pure-blood wizarding families. Within the ideology, there's this obsession with purity and its opposite, filth. And let's appreciate what a vicious, rapid turn this was. Draco immediately used the most sensitive piece of information he knew about Harry to hurt him. He launched the nukes at the first sign of social rejection. If he was polite and just kept his mouth shut, he might have been able to befriend Harry, maybe even pull him away from Ron and influence him slowly. Who knows, Harry might have faced the Sorting Hat thinking being sorted into Slytherin wasn't that big of a deal. And if Harry didn't have a strong opinion, he could have ended up in the dungeon with the Snaky Boys, changing the entire course of the story. Now, 11-year-olds aren't known for their emotional control, but Draco is a member of the house whose prized trait is cunning. This isn't at all cunning. It's actually very emotionally unintelligent. Draco either can't read people or he doesn't care to, and he's too emotional to be good at manipulating people through charm. He defaults to threats and fear. I wonder where he learned that. I love how before Harry knows the specifics of what Draco's talking about or his ideology, he can just recognize through tone that Draco is unpleasant. Even though Draco dislikes Muggles, he's got quite a bit in common with Harry's cousin, Dudley Dursley. These two spoiled blonde boys are prone to explosive outbursts.
36 for last year! Last year I had 37!
Yes, well, some of them are quite a bit bigger than last year.
I don't care how big they are!
And they're both going to have serious troubles growing up because their parents are lovingly poisoning their minds. I think in the hearts of some spoiled children, there's something dark and desperate, almost primal. What do you do when you have everything? Well, I think you overreact to roadblocks. Maybe it's because you've never had anyone say no to you before. But I think in addition to that, maybe even more so, the environment might make you neurotic. It seems to me that because Dudley and Draco like their life and have it all, they kind of freak out at the first signs that they're losing ground. And I don't think that feeling comes from nowhere. I think it reflects the disposition of their parents. Alan E. Kasdan is a research professor of child psychology who focuses on the treatment of aggressive or antisocial behavior in children. He gave this quote to fatherly.com. Kids are more likely to mimic behavior than they are to adjust their behavior to fit expectations. In other words, spoiled parents raise spoiled kids. A public-minded, generous, and polite parent might shower his or her child in privilege and presents and still raise a public-minded, generous, and polite child. Continuing from the article, Kasdan's point isn't that parents are unwise or unreasonable to worry about spoiling their kids, but that they are focused on the wrong mechanisms and failing to take an adequately hard look at themselves. Petunia and Vernon Dursley drown their son Dudley with presents to reassure him that even though he doesn't have magic powers, he is special. The source of this motivation is a deep wound of Petunia's caused by her sister suddenly getting a letter to Hogwarts, soaking up all of their parents' attention, disappearing for most of the year, and dying young. So they go overboard appeasing Dudley, and they make Harry the enemy of the household who it's acceptable to bully. Both Dudley and his parents have these two modes of being. They have one foot in being a happy upper middle class family, and the other in these clawing, screaming attempts to control their environment and everyone in it. So, what does this have to do with Draco? Well, it's the same thing on a larger scale with an entire group of people as the enemy instead of one boy. Draco's parents, Narcissa and Lucius Malfoy, spoil Draco and raise him in an environment to believe he's special because he's a pure-blood wizard. And Muggles and Muggleborns are the designated enemy. The Malfoys take their inherited and expanding wealth as proof of their superiority over the poorer Weasley family, who they consider blood traitors for not valuing their pure blood status. I believe young Draco greatly admires his parents and seeks to mimic their mannerisms, values, and opinions so he can replicate their success. But he also absorbs a suicidal type of self-preservation that invents threats to fight against. Have you ever heard of defensive eating? People who eat all the food in the house so that other people can't eat it first? That's what this is. It's defensive eating with power, and it's the foundation of Draco Malfoy's identity. Draco is 11 years old in the first book, but he never really gets any better at manipulating people. Draco is a little cunning in the sense that he knows the effective way to mess with Harry are indirect avenues of applying pressure, where he gets groups of people to go after Harry instead of directly confronting him. For example, when Harry gets chosen as Hogwarts' second champion for the Triwizard Tournament, Draco makes badges for other students to wear, so Harry is continually confronted with everyone hating him. But from Harry's perspective, when compared to Dementors, dragons, Umbridge, and Voldemort, Draco can't hold a candle as a threat. He is very prone to having metaphorical anvils comedically fall on him and squash his ego. As the stakes of the story rise and Voldemort grows more powerful, Draco basically goes from rival
Scared, Potter.
You wish.
to pathetic mini-boss
I want father to hear about this.
Is that a threat?
Professor Moody.
Is that a threat? I can tell you stories about your father that would burn even your greasy hair, boy!
Alistair.
It doesn't end here!
to the lackey of other more sinister villains. And the movies actually punch this up a notch, milking Draco more often for comedy.
You got something on your face. My bullet!
This might surprise you, but I actually don't mind that the movies make Draco look like more of a coward because, well, I don't think it's saying anything about him that's not true. The fact that he's a coward is important to the plot. It's his discomfort with violence that keeps him from fully embracing Voldemort. I mean emotionally, that's just something. Draco was raised in a time of peace. Brought to you by Harry Potter, the boy who lived to be resented by this jealous jellybean. Every year, Draco continues to shrink as a threat. By the time Half-Blood Prince rolls around, Ron and Hermione find Harry's new obsession with this idea that Draco is a Death Eater kind of laughable.
Harry is under the impression Draco Malfoy is now a Death Eater.
Okay. What's your hero with so like now?
And just like, I always love this so much. They're like, Harry, Draco's awful. Like, this isn't Chamber of Secrets. He's not even good enough to be a red herring anymore. Draco could like try to pin a fart on somebody else and Karma would no-scope him from across the map. But of course, they were wrong, and it is at this point in the story Draco transcends his role as a schoolyard bully into more thematically complex territory.
Years ago, a little boy who made all the wrong choices. Please let me help.
I don't want your help.
Double
Don't you
points.
understand?
Time to double
Do this.
down!
I have to kill you. He's gonna kill me.
If you look up movie clips of Draco from Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows 1 or 2 in the comment section, you'll probably see the phrase Draco Malfoy, the boy who had no choice. It will be photoshopped into many dramatic stills or gifs of Draco. Draco had no choice in the sense that between the 5th and 6th book, he appears to have been selected by Voldemort to kill Dumbledore as punishment for his father's failures. That's Dumbledore's interpretation of what happened, so I'm inclined to believe it. He also did not choose to be born into a home that would try to indoctrinate him into their wizard supremacist belief system. But I will say, I don't buy the modestly popular fan interpretation that Draco was hit or yelled at by his parents, or even just crushed under the weight of their expectations pre-Voldemort taking over Malfoy Manor. I'm sure people that make this argument would argue that this is not meant to be a justification for his bigotry, just an analysis of his particular case of brain. So the thought process here is that it's very dismissive to paint him as a spoiled child. Just because all of his material needs were met doesn't mean everything was as it should have been at home. To truly appreciate this character, you have to look to the goop. You must appreciate all his lost, grubby, gargled marbles that are not in his head. Okay, that's fair. I'll dive into that, buddy. I'll dive into anything except actual